So next session is with JD, that's James, Wilson, and Joel. Hello, Joel and JD. Do I see JD here?
Hey,
There's
good
JD.
morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Great, great.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, very good. You guys want to introduce yourselves briefly, and then we'll go to the.
Sure. I'll start. This is James Wilson, and Salim knows me as GD. And I work as the acting Chief Digital Officer at Voice of America. And we're happy to be here to share a little bit about our journey to Kubernetes.
And I'm Joel Lehman. I'm a data/solutions architect at Voice of America, a little bit of a jack of all trades. So glad to be here.
All right, very good. Okay, so we've been working with JD and Joel. I've been in conversations with them, so I'll walk through some of the conversations that we've had about their journey to Kubernetes. So first thing, just to start with the obvious, you guys have been, and by the way, I want to invite everyone to just write their questions in the chat if they have any as we're going through, so we can go ahead and ask them through. So I just want to keep this interactive as well. So, just starting with the obvious here, JD and Joel, you guys have been on a hosted platform for a while, I think. Why did you guys choose to go to Kubernetes? What was the decision? What were the conversations, and what was the decision?
Yeah, I guess Kubernetes is it's not just from a hosted platform, because you can run Kubernetes in all kinds of ways, right? It's so. But for us, I think, we are big into agile, lean, and we're trying to bring that kind of culture and thinking to an environment that is still relatively growing in its adoption of those kinds of things, including cloud technologies. So, going back, my history is into software development. So the idea of running just everything in one as one big application, the progression to go down to making services, things like that, that's part of that kind of journey of getting us to something like a Kubernetes. We have right now some workloads, which mainly we do news websites that are pretty much just, a web application that's just running on a host, and people are just managing it manually, so to speak. The whole CI/CD ideas are kind of new to them. So introducing things like Docker has been new. So that we brought here. So of course, now we're kind of break up our services, and then taking our application from a Docker to scale it out and to be able to manage it better. It was kind of a natural to want to look at a platform like Kubernetes to do that. So it kind of goes deeper into changing how we actually build software, and how we would then platform it as well.
Yeah. Joel, you want to add anything to that? You're on mute.
Oh, you're muted, Joe.
From a developer standpoint, from a solutions architect standpoint, Kubernetes just sort of makes sense. It's a lot, it's getting to infrastructure as code, moving serverless environment. So it sort of seems like the right place to be, the right direction to be heading in now.
You were breaking up a little bit. I don't know if that's my connection or yours, but
It was breaking up here too.
okay. So if you have a cable, a wired connection, then you might want to try that. So, anyways, okay, I'll continue with the questions here, the slides here. So the next thing we had talked about is, you know, that most organizations want this. They want out of the box infrastructure setup. They want out of the box application management, out of the box monitoring, log management, CI/CD management. They want managed deployments like blue-green A/B deployments. They want security updates and patches done for them. They want 99.9% uptime guarantees. They want cost management, and they want technical support and customer support. So and how do you get there, right? So what was your solution to that?
Let me just add to, I know you said manage security updates and patches. Yes, security is a big one. Our approach again was more of a we know from past experience, you know, having used, you know, I've used OpenShift, I've used some other Cloud Foundry. I've used other platforms to run applications on in the past, so I kind of already had an idea that this is something, you know, it's used already, and you know, we just need to help get our agency up to that level of using it. And I know there's a lot involved in doing that, but you know, we didn't take this whole approach of, okay, let me maybe make a checklist of things I need to get done to make sure. We did more along the line of that kind of lean approach, and you know, try to start small. And so, you know, what we're doing now is trying to look at, can we actually change our workflow now to include, you know, using Kubernetes. So like I said, now we already are using some Dockerized containers. Can we now scale it up to run in a completely managed platform? A lot of these other things we haven't dealt with, but you know, CI/CD will be included in that. The monitoring piece will be a little bit, but there's other things that we're going to have to grow on, and as we get there.
Yeah. Joel, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think also the cost and billing controls, for us, we really need fine granularity on that. We really need to get sort of a better handle on how much does a dev environment cost, how much does UAT testing cost, and if we can get a better control on those, down to the point where you're spinning up a UAT environment just for UAT testing, spinning it down when you're done. That's sort of where we want to be as far as managing the cost, and you know, Kubernetes really pushes us in that direction.
Yeah. Okay, good. So moving along, this is one of the things that the other things we had talked about is when you're going on your journey to Kubernetes, you know, you're always starting with your discussions about, your conversations about, let me go back, your cloud, architecture. This is, you select Kubernetes, then you're writing your, your small hello world program. You're trying it out locally on your server. You launch it on your cloud provider. Then you graduate to running Drupal, running MySQL database, stateful applications. You try Helm, and then you ask yourself if you're ready to run production apps. But that's not it, right? So then you're going, after that you still have to run non-production apps, non-critical apps, and then you have to talk about monitoring and how are you going to do monitoring. If you're going to build it, you're going to buy it. How are you going to do logging? If you're going to build it, you're going to buy it. How are you going to do the configuration of all that? When you get to mission critical apps, you're talking about performance testing, cost management, day two operations, and how are you going to take care of Kubernetes upgrades, backups, restores. There's a lot here, right? There's outages, there's support and SLA. These are all the things that you guys had brought up, right?
Yeah.
There was security. How do you do even that, the new supply chain, the SolarWinds incident where we were talking about the supply chain security management, security audits, the responsibility of defining who's taking care of infrastructure, who's taking care of applications, contingency planning of when you have loss of data center and you have loss of access to a data center, what happens then? So with all that in mind, what is your approach to answering those questions? And what else are we missing? And how did you get, what was your process for discovering those questions?
You want to go, John?
I really think it was these slides accurately portray our journey. It was a journey of discovery. We would reach a certain step and say, okay, well, how are we going to manage logging? We'd reach another step and say, how do we manage security? And I think our approach was just essentially one step at a time. At the end of every step, there's going to be more questions and more things you didn't consider, and but just keep going.
And let me just add too, I mean, that was pretty, you have all these questions, there's lots of questions in there. And we didn't go through, again, that long checklist. Our approach has been a lot more, we believe we can do this. let's try to prove it out. Let's take some baby steps forward. And practically, we're probably at that 3, getting a more complex workload really running, and haven't quite answered or implemented a lot of the more challenging questions going forward. So we thought about them, but we don't have those things necessarily in place just yet. So again, our approach has been to go small and to move forward. So we have also experience, again, just outside of working here at VOA, that tells us, again, we can do this. It's possible to do this. When you mention about, is this going to be hosted or self-managed? Our goals are certainly, as much as possible, that we don't have to manage it, but it meets our security requirements. So finding a managed service that can do that and take care of the underlying host it's critical for us. You're looking at our staff for the most part, Joel, myself, maybe, one other person to help get some of this going. So we don't have a lot of time to deal with a lot of things at this point. So as much as we can in terms of shifting some of the responsibilities we want to do. And so, in our case, we chose, and we're working in, a particular cloud vendor that has a managed Kubernetes. And so that just alleviates a lot of concerns. And it's also something that we trust will meet our security requirements.
Yeah.
And
Go
I think
ahead.
another thing was not being afraid to take a step back. We've done that many times in sort of the journey. And for example, we were looking into ECS, Amazon ECS versus EKS. And initially we started down the road of ECS, has some advantages, but when we started to look at our workload and what we wanted to achieve, we went back and focused on EKS.
Yeah, it's a good point. You don't know where your discoveries are going to take you, and sometimes you have to take a step back and go in a different direction. Um, so just going through some of these things. Uh, you said you're at step 3 right now. Have you guys looked at, have you run non-critical apps on the cloud, or have you looked at monitoring? Have you looked at logging? How are you dealing with these type of things?
No, I mean, we have not. We don't have those things in place just yet. We have ideas on how that would be done, but again, like I said, we have a lot of growing pains to do, I think, overall, especially since we're running this in a cloud environment, and a lot of people are relatively new to that. So it's an environment that we have to put some of that infrastructure in place to do that, right? So so no, those particular logging kind of tools we haven't quite considered are implemented.
Yeah. We had talked about things for managing critical applications and for looking at your critical applications. You had talked about lift and shift versus re-architecture and some data migration issues, some performance testing concerns that you had, and some cost management concerns. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Sure. I think I'll speak a little bit on the data migration piece. And this isn't necessarily like a lift and shift, like taking it from a data center into cloud or that, as much as it was the application itself was getting re-architected. And so there was data migration issues going on there, and we're introducing it into the cloud as well. And so there were certainly some advantages to being able to work in a cloud environment. Just all of the normal things that you get, such as pay as you go, scalability, and things like that. So that really helped. Storage, for example, really helped. But one of those challenges that we had was we actually had terabytes of data in another country that we needed to migrate over into a cloud in in the US, and lots of learning experiences there with those migration tools and so forth. So that was a lot of a huge learning experience there. And then I guess in terms of the lift and shift versus re-architecture, that's always a consideration that you have to make, especially one of our goals, of course, is to try to do more cloud native deployments and having our applications deployed that way. And of course, just lifting and shifting into the cloud doesn't necessarily guarantee that will happen. And so there is sometimes things that we did to try to do that. So for example, using a managed service to do caching versus just running it on a VM. So those are kind of natural things.
Yeah. For cost for cost management, what are your concerns and how do you do cost management in your organization? Is it per department? Is it per site? Is it how is it that you want to do cost management, or how do you break up cost management?
Well, let me see if I can answer it this way. We have to, we usually get a budget every year. And so that becomes kind of, we have to kind of estimate this is what we're going to spend this year. And then we have this other kind of crazy requirement of typically you need to spend it all by the end of that year, because you got to make another request for it coming next year. So budget requests are, and getting that money is kind of a strange way of working. So, but once we get that money allocated, and assigned to our particular project, so it's typically going to be, this program office, and then for this project, then we're able to just track it there on the project level. So, but it's mainly controlled by that program office. Yeah. So, I don't know if we mentioned before, we work for a federal government agency. So those are some of the constraints that we have with budgeting. But for the most part, it's going to be project by project that we're managing our costs.
Right. Joel, you have anything to add to this?
While it is project by project, I think I touched on this before, it would be really nice to get down to a point where you know exactly how much you're spending on like a dev environment, a test environment, and the production environment, and splitting those out so you have a better idea of what direction you can point your developers in. And if you can reduce those costs and get down to a point where we've allocated X amount to dev, we haven't spent that, you guys can go ahead and try to prove a concept, certain things. That would be the ideal place to be in.
Right, so it's not just cost management tracking, it's also cost controls that you need in place so that you know when you're going over, when you know you have extra money left. So yeah.
Yes, good point.
Yeah. Okay, let me jump to some of the other questions that I had written down. So when you were going into this project, what were you expecting, and what were some of the challenges that you faced, and some things that caught you by surprise?
Sorry. Oh, I had a call coming in. Challenges that we faced and expectations. I think it kind of goes back to the reason why we would even consider moving into a Kubernetes. We thought it could solve, or in this case, we thought it should be able to solve some of our concerns. So one of it is to be able to adopt more cloud native technologies and services versus just having a web application running in a some kind of 2 or 3 tiered environment, so that we were kind of manually maintaining and the likes. So we wanted to kind of get out of that architecture and really put as much effort into services, developing the application itself, and letting that architecture kind of be developed, like Joel was saying, through code. But in this case, this is platform. The beauty of a platform is we don't have to worry about all that orchestration and communication between services, those complexities. We can define those relationships, in a file and code, and go from there. So so those are some of the, I think one big challenge we wanted to try to overcome is become more cloud native with our software development. And I think expectation wise is we're gonna get it to work. Now, with all technologies, there's learning curves, things that you're going to discover along the way, and difficulties, but the expectation is we're going to get this to work, and it's going to actually be beneficial to our agency. I want to say we kind of expected, oh, this should be, easy, but nothing's easy. And all the tools and all the help we can get to help us along that way is what we've been looking at. So, I mean, we could just go straight to a Kubernetes platform and just try to do it ourselves, or we could try to get other tools that can help us do that. And so that's another part of our journey, is we try to look for other helpers that could assist us in that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Joel, if you wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of our challenges is what is driving us into this environment. We're a small team running high volume websites, and all while trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. So we're having to do less or do more with less, trying to get into a point where we're in a managed environment, we're in a serverless environment, we're not just in the cloud on an EC2 instance while we're still maintaining the operating system, we're still doing the updates. We need to be more hands-off and relying on managed services and serverless environments. So I think that was our fundamental challenge, is what sort of pushed us in this direction. And so it was out of necessity.
Yeah. Are there any things that caught you guys by surprise?
I would say a good surprise was it was easier than I thought it would be in certain ways. It was easier to get it up and running. But once we started looking at how do we manage this, how do we do code releases, how do we integrate a CI/CD pipeline, those things were surprises that came out after we said, oh my gosh, we got this up and working. This is doable. This is feasible. We should probably head in this direction. It was the surprises that followed, like, how do we do this? Okay, there's another step of the ladder to tackle. So.
Right, interesting. Okay, how long have you guys been at this, and how far do you think you've gotten? And
You recall, Joel? I'm going to say we're probably only a few months in, but
yeah, 5 months maybe.
Yeah, I would say that.
oh, so you guys have made good progress then. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, the initial, proofing it out and setting it up and getting something working.
Right. I mean, we had lots of let's try this, let's try this template, or let's try this architecture. Let's see how this would work. And it was an evolution, and Joel keeps bringing that serverless up. I mean, that is such a next level, I think, of operating that I haven't completely grasped the value of it, but I love that idea that I don't even have to think, not only that I don't have to think about host as much, but or patching them and things like that. I can even get more granular and just run this function off, and it could do its thing. And so it's been a lot of that kind of growth, I think,
Yeah.
things along the way.
Yeah.
All of our recent small scale applications have been serverless.
Yeah.
It's going mainly to Lambda functions, to create API gateways.
Yeah.
So that's definitely where we're moving everything, all of our new development, at least.
Yeah. And I'm going to quote someone from Amazon. I forget who said it, but it was the quote was, "The best server is the server you don't have to manage." So yeah, it's your serverless environment. So okay, okay, moving along on our slides here. So this is the utopia. This is what everyone wants, but this is where they end up being, where everyone finds themselves. Where this is, their state of people, processes, technologies, and contracts, where all your SLAs come in and all the vendors come in and stuff, where you're going to have to deal with different vendors and bring everything together. So, and with this is, it's great when you have. It's not that great, but you'll have a system that works, but you've got these different pieces. The risk here is having different silos of these stacks, and these silos are different. And the risk here is that you're going to create, you can set up your systems in a way that creates a cascading system of failures, and you don't know these when you're setting them up, but this happens when you experience the first failure, and then it's very hard to recover from those because your systems are a mess. They're a jumble. So how do you go about solving this puzzle? How do you de-risk your environment?
Oh, well, let me just add or just comment that, as Joel has mentioned, we're a small team, so in some respects there's not like a whole lot of competition between different projects trying to do the same thing and so forth. So everything that we're learning as we're doing our work now is only going to help us improve along the way. So in one sense, we're not going to have the risk of, again, all these different groups are doing things differently, because it's just us right now who are doing things. It doesn't mean we're not going to not be able to reach or not get to that jumbled mess. It's going to be messy, I think, to start, but we'll start like we're doing, small, and keep iterating to try to get us to that better state.
And don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to take a step back.
Yeah. And it's about iterating, isn't it? You're
Absolutely.
you're building small, you're failing fast, and you're learning and iterating. So yeah. Okay. For Kubernetes, we had talked about your experience with Kubernetes and what how far has Kubernetes come. So what is your knowledge about Kubernetes, and what is your experience about how far has it come, and when you selected it, and we touched on this earlier as well, but is this something you would select again, going down this path?
I mean, if you want to be able to orchestrate Docker containers, but I guess it can do other containers as well at any scale, Kubernetes seems to have become the de facto, I guess, best way to do that. So It's well, from what I've seen the last 5 years or so, it's only grown in its adoption, and so.
Joel?
And, you know, for us, just the ability to take that workload, develop on a local environment, move it to AWS. If, you know, our leadership determines that we're going Azure next month, we need to be able to move that workload to Azure. And so Kubernetes works for all those environments. So it's very flexible. And I would say it's definitely the choice if you have the same constraints as we have, or even if you don't have them.
Yeah, it gives you a wide range of
It's
choice of
very flexible.
compatibility. Yeah, yeah. And so this is something you would recommend to others, and how would you have them get started on the road to Kubernetes? Like, what would their steps be? Are there anything in specific you would recommend? Like, if you were to do it again?
Well, you need to learn Docker.
Yeah.
Or Docker containers, I think, would be number one, and kind of love that idea of working at that level with services that are containerized. And then as you're thinking about, well, how can I deploy this at any scale and so forth, you know, Kubernetes would be that next logical choice, which you can then run locally and understand. But again, it's going to be just as much as learning Docker. You're going to have to be learning the different you know, kube control commands and YAML file configurations, etc., to do things. So anyway, Docker would be the starting point to my mind.
Yeah. You have anything to add, Joel?
No, I agree. Docker first, then Kubernetes, and, you know, do it locally on your workstation, laptop.
Yeah.
Then you can move to the cloud as the next progression.
Yeah. Anything people should watch out for? Anything they should plan for? Any do's and don'ts?
Dockers on MacBook can be finicky.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, where to run your Docker is definitely can vary, because yeah, Macs, Windows, Linux machine, I think the implementations aren't necessarily consistent across, and getting that started by itself can be challenging. And we work across, you know, Windows and Mac and Linux, so but in terms of the Kubernetes, I guess it's, again, you got to learn the concepts. Would be good. In remote development environments, yeah, I think we've run stuff like in Cloud9.
Cloud9's great.
It's been great to do things. Try to get a consistent environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cloud9, for folks that don't know, is the AWS IDE. Yeah, cloud-based IDE.
Two instances.
Yeah. Yeah.
I personally have had the best experience with Linux. But
yeah,
it's just me.
Docker on Linux, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the fastest. Yeah.
Is it even still a container if it's on Linux? Right?
Yeah, still container.
Both as native as it's gonna get.
Yeah. So I think we're done here. So I want to open this up for questions. If anyone has questions or they want to ask the VOA team about their experiences or anything about their Kubernetes journey. So go ahead, please.
There's a question on chat.
Yeah, about remote development. Yeah, we talked about that. Anything else? Okay, so thank you guys very much. It was great having you here, and thanks for sharing. This is very good. So
Thanks for having
Yeah.
us.
yeah,
For having us.
okay.
Bye.
So thank you.